Hello and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile. This is the show where I get to talk about sports, I get to talk about business, and I get to talk about everything in between. And today is a fun one. I have Austin Karp. He's the managing editor of digital at Sports Business Journal and Daily. Austin, how you doing today, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure, Austin, is all mine. I promise you that. It's a good day to be alive. It's going to be a fun one. And obviously, I love sports business. And who else would I rather talk to than a guy that works at Sports
It's a
Business
great
Journal?
topic. I love it.
It's a fun one. It's an interesting one. I think it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger over time. But Austin, the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
I mean, I have always had a very big affinity for sports, played and watched growing up, just like anybody else. It never really occurred to me that sports could be a career. It wasn't like something that I had gravitated towards. I was more into international affairs and politics and business a little bit, and the law. I kind of always had I thought, oh, I'll be a lawyer since I'm around 8 years old, and that's where I ended up. It wasn't until that I really wanted to say, what do I want to do with the rest of my career, that I was like, all right, it just so happened Sports Business Journal is in Charlotte. I was in Charlotte working at a law firm here. There was an opportunity to do some research there on the ground level, and my boss to this day, Abe Madcore, is like, are you sure you want to do that? And I was like, yeah, this is a great opportunity. And, years later, he was like, I was surprised you lasted 6 months. And, here I am 15 years later.
I love it, man. I think it's awesome. And I definitely want to dive into that aspect of going from attorney to research associate in a little bit. But I think it's important for people to understand that, yes, there's a lot of different things you can do in sports. And that's why I actually started the show, was because personally, when I was coming out of college, it was, well, do you want to sell tickets? No. Oh, well, guess you can't work in sports. It's like, that's the only way you can get in.
Yeah.
And that is not the reality, obviously. There's so many different people doing so many different things, entrepreneurs, different businesses. Obviously, the tech aspect has absolutely exploded over the last 5 to 10 years. So that was just something very frustrating. So I thought, I know a lot of cool people. Why don't I just talk to them and ask them questions about what they're doing? Because I used to go to New York City all the time, and I used to network constantly and meet all these people doing all these cool things. And now I use LinkedIn a lot for that. So everybody that has received LinkedIn messages from me, pleasure to meet you. But
the technology helps. It helps keep people closer. It does.
It definitely does. But it was fun. So now just getting to talk to people about some of the things that they've done and what they're doing, I think is pretty important. And I guess let's go back to that aspect. So you're a lawyer, hot shot, getting ready, right? You're a young guy, excited, hey, you got the whole world's like, hey, in the next 5 to 10 years, I'll be making X dollars, and I'll be, wearing suits and looking good and this, that, and the other. And then what was it about this opportunity that, going from attorney to research associate, I mean, that's an ego hit right away, especially at a young age. Like, that's kind of a difficult thing to tell your parents, to tell your friends, like, I was on this path to become a lawyer, and now I think it would be kind of fun to work at a upstart media company. Like, what was that aspect of taking that job like?
There were a few surprised people in my life, family members, friends, like, didn't you just spend 3 years, going to law school? It's like, yeah, but I guess if you ask the people I knew best, like, once I told them I got into sports, they're like, yeah, you should have been doing that the whole time. But, I did go to law school, and I wasn't sure at the, while I was in there, that I necessarily wanted to practice law. I had kind of geared a lot towards maybe public service. I had passed the foreign service exam for the State Department and had looked into getting into the foreign service there. But, I got out, looked up for some other, government related jobs. I'm very civic minded, and that's something that I would have been very proud to do. But eventually, you do have to get a job. And I ended up working for a firm, one of the best firms here in Charlotte, Moore and Van Allen, and I was doing work for them. And it's a very nice firm with very talented people, and I would have been, very probably happy to stay there. Like you said, being a lawyer is, it's a successful career. But I was just looking at myself, trying to, really know myself a little better. And it's like, do I really want to do this? And I think you hear that with a lot of attorneys or a lot of people that have gone to law school. It's like, I'm not really into the law. I maybe thought it was a safe option. And it's always good to have the law degree, because you are able to do so many things. You have a very analytical mind. You're taught to do that day in and day out for a while. I saw this opportunity. It was honestly like in a print ad, like a little 2-inch ad for Sports Business Journal. And I knew somebody who had worked there, and I asked them about it, and they're like, yeah, it's great. And I'm like, all right, let me potentially interview for a sports job. to see what it's like. And I interviewed with Abe Madcore and some other people. And like I said, Abe's like, are you sure you want to do something like this? And I was like, yeah, I think it'd be a fantastic opportunity. And yeah, I started off doing research on, anything with a number, attendance, ROI for sponsors on TV. And what I really got into was the television audience metrics, ratings. And I've kind of really, I took over that and really made it my own and kind of established that as like my go-to. Like I talk to publications all around, the country on, what they mean. And especially now because ratings are maybe more important than ever. But I mean, the switch was surprising, but it was totally worth it. I enjoy going to work every day. And if you can do that, it's such a fantastic thing.
There are so many people that every day, 5 days a week, hate what they do
Yeah.
for 9 to 10 hours a day if you had that commute in there, and that was just never something that I could get, I couldn't do that. I had a job in finance for a little while, it wasn't for
Mhm.
me. I quickly got out of that, and yeah, haven't hated a day in my life since, thankfully, so, I mean
It's tough to find your way sometimes, and you got to try some different things. And yeah, like the pay scale from going from attorney to journalism, and you got to be willing to make that sort of sacrifice. And it's work, and you just got to find what's good for you.
Yes, and worst comes to worst, I mean, you still have the law degree, right? Like,
Yes,
if after 6 months it didn't quite work out, I'm sure there
could
was a
have always
firm
gone back to the law.
somewhere in Charlotte, somewhere in the United States that could have possibly hired you back, and I'm sure you would have been just fine, as you said, being able to do that. And I guess one thing about the sports world that's always, I mean, I'm okay with it because I live in it and I love it, and, some days it gets a little more tiring than others, but the always being on. Like, I'm
Mm.
sure in the beginning it was a little different than what it is now. Maybe it's not. You can educate us on that, but especially understanding. So if the ratings were your thing, I assume that's something that you're up at a very early time in the morning, Monday through Sunday, figuring out, all right, what was the college football? What was the NFL? What was this? What was that?
Mhm.
How have you dealt with personally the always on aspect of living in this sports world?
It's tough. It's tough for the first 12 years, I believe, of working with SBJ, SBD. I was more on the daily side. So I was
Mhm.
in the office 5:45 every day,
Whew.
Monday through Friday. And, not leaving till 4:30. And, the way that we operated, you were kind of done at that point. But yeah, it is, I got to know what's going on the TV landscape all the time. What's on, what's going on. There isn't so much Saturday, Sunday work because, Nielsen, who produces these, doesn't really come out with ratings on the
Mhm.
weekend. So you gear yourself up to a routine, like, when there used to be overnights, those are coming out Monday morning. You're making your calls to all the networks on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever, national numbers come out, the numbers that really matter. And you're doing that. And on, is there a game Thursday? If it's midweek, there could be an NBA Finals game or a Monday Night Football game or an NHL final. There's just, you got to pay attention to the calendar a lot, what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people need to, when getting into sports, it's something that you really need to understand. So you brought up ratings a
Mhm.
couple times, and I was gonna wait to ask this, but rather than
Yeah.
forgetting, I'm just gonna ask it now. How do ratings work? Does anybody actually know? Because I've heard like how Nielsen actually produces them, and it sounds like totally bogus, and it doesn't sound like we're actually getting any amount of information from it. So please educate us on how ratings work, especially if you've been doing this thing for like 15 years.
So, like, if you're talking about a rating, it's like one rating, a 1.0
Mhm,
is like, 1% of the total number of households that are, TV households in the U.S., which I can't remember the number. But it's, over 100 million or
mhm,
120 million or something like that these days. I can't even remember the number, but the number that I focus on is not so much a rating because no one, like you said, no one understands what a rating is.
nope,
And years ago, I switched to describing it as, viewers. How many eyeballs watched this? 100 million people watched the Super Bowl.
mhm,
People are more able to grasp that and understand that and make comparisons between the two. Um, but yeah, Nielsen has a proprietary, measurement system for how they get all that, and it's not perfect, but everybody uses it and everybody knows that it's not perfect.
mhm,
And they try to keep Nielsen honest in terms of, how they're measuring, where they're measuring parts of the country. A household in Tampa with, a lot of retirees, 2 people in a home is not a household in Utah where there might be 7 or 8 people or something like that, just
mhm.
given, sizes of families in different parts of the country. And, there's just a lot, and they are getting more digital in terms of their measurement. They are getting away from, the people writing in a diary what they were watching the night before. Like, that's just antiquated, and
Mhm.
you want to use the best technology possible. If you're watching on a set-top box, it's just a lot easier to pull off of that what they were watching, based on the data of who is in that home. And, for sports in particular, something they rolled out now is quicker measurement of the out-of-home number,
Mhm.
which, in a non-COVID world on a Sunday, people are packing bars, restaurants, airports, gather around any TV they can find to watch like a football game. And that could, some of that was baked into numbers that they provide to advertisers, that advertisers pay. But, you could be talking about a 5 to 15 or 20% increase in the number once you factor in
Mhm.
those out-of-home measurements. Because you're talking about dorms and vacation homes. There's just so much that wasn't really measured, for watching football, because it is especially on Sundays, it's a communal activity where people gather at bars, and you find me a bar that's not packed on a Sunday morning afternoon normally.
You can go to the bar on Sunday morning. I'm not gonna say anything, man. Don't worry.
Premier League coverage, of course.
Yeah, see, perfect. There we go. You can watch soccer and yell with the hooligans. There's nothing wrong. I've walked through New York City at 10 in the morning on Saturdays and Sundays. You hear
Yeah,
that?
I heard it's a rabid and
It is
growing thing.
nuts. It's nuts, but it's also a blast. So shout out to all those crazy people. We gotta love them. And I guess because ratings have been very confusing to me as just kind of
Mhm.
a person on the outside. It's just like, well, why can't Comcast just tell them what I was watching? Like, why can't Verizon just be like, this is how many people watch the Giants on Sunday? And
Do
I
you
just
trust them? Do you trust them to give you an internal number that is accurate? That's what the great thing about Nielsen and other companies is great, is that it's a third party. And that's what advertisers in particular want, because they're the ones that are paying the ad dollars. They want to know that a third party is telling them that this program got this many viewers and they're getting the return on investment that they were seeking.
Interesting. Yeah, it's always been something. It's always been something. So after getting, starting your career here at SBJ SBD,
Mhm.
um, you then made it to assistant managing editor. You did that for about a decade.
Yeah.
That's a long time. What exactly, what does that increased role look like, going from a research associate now to being a managing editor at this publication?
I folded the research department into that role, so I was still doing a lot of the research. But yeah, I was, helping to manage the writers and put out our Sports Business Daily products, which is like, our morning buzz, which kind of sets the tone for the day. Our bigger product, the daily, which comes out around noon. And the best way to describe the daily or any of these features and then from the daily is an executive news service, summing up, mainly 80%, 85% aggregation of what we see around the country. We're searching hundreds of sites and Twitter and listening to podcasts and TV shows and, newspapers you've never heard of from, small college towns, and to see if they've struck any sort of deal. We're trying to gather as much information as we can, synthesize it, and, really provide executives a look at what's going on, reactions to telecasts from TV critics, things like that. So that's kind of what the 12 p.m. feed looks like. And then there's a closing bell at 4 o'clock that is kind of a snapshot of maybe stuff that went on during the day, what might be going on that night for either, if it's a documentary that's breaking or
Mhm.
a telecast that's going on that night. For game one of the World Series, maybe we'll give you a World Series ratings trend to kind of show you what to expect. Now we also have these these newsletters. So there's just a lot going on. But from the daily side, that's what I was doing, helping put those products together, helping really shape what was going on there. Rick Ellington, he's the managing editor of Sports Business Daily. He's been doing this a little bit longer than I have, and he's really an expert at that.
That is incredible. 5:45 every morning. Shout out
Rick
to you.
Ellington's there around 5 o'clock in the morning every day for at least the last 13, 14 years. The guy's a
That is
machine.
and you have to love what you do at that point, right? It makes it a lot easier, I'm sure, if
It
you get
does.
to
He's
love
a
what you
big
do.
sports guy. I give him hell for being a Chapel Hill fan, and
Oh, no. Let's
there's a
go,
lot of
Duke.
ACC ribbing going on, considering we're in Charlotte. A lot of ACC guys, so it's a fun office environment to be in.
Let's go, Duke, man. Let's go, Duke. I'm all
See what I'm
for it.
talking about?
There we go. There we go. So at what point? So you're there. You're there for 12 years or whatever up to this point. At what point do you kind of push your chips into the table and say, I think digital, I don't think this is as much of
Mhm.
a fad anymore, right? I remember when the first iPhone came out, was that 2008 maybe? And I remember
Mhm.
the first person that had it was richer kid in high school, and we're all like, "Oh my god, can we look at it?" You couldn't do anything with it, but it was really cool. And then obviously smartphones got to get more integrated into our society, and now everybody has one in their pocket pretty much. I guess at what point did you guys and girls over at SPJ, SPD,
Mhm.
or you personally, when did you collectively make the decision that, hey, like this is gonna be bigger. This is gonna be a lot bigger. Podcasts are gonna be a thing. Video is
Mhm.
gonna be one of the most important things
Yeah.
on planet Earth. How did you come to that decision personally to wanna make that your career path, but then also as the publication?
You know, as a journalist, I'm a digital native coming into the sports business daily side.
Mhm,
We have a lot of long time, journalism school guys on the print side. So it was kind of bringing everything together, especially on the journal side, and like how reading the tea leaves out there, reading trends out there, like what are people reading? How are they consuming their information? And you're seeing people were starting to create these newsletters, and it's outside of sports, you have your Axios and your Politicos, and CNN, and Brian Stelter was started doing one from CNN, like quicker reads, or in your inbox. A lot of people are just spending a lot more time in their inbox these
mhm,
days, and we were like, how can we get into that space? And we had some discussions, and I was like, this is a fantastic opportunity. And we started off doing one on media twice a day with John Arand, and or twice a week, excuse me,
mhm.
and twice a week on college with Michael Smith, who covers that space, because those are pretty big areas to cover, particularly with the business of sports. And we've grown it because people want more quick, easy things to get through. So we have esports, we have football. We'll be launching sports betting this week.
Nice.
So we have, once was something we started at the beginning of the pandemic, was kind of a catch-all that we call SBJ Unpacks. And, that's open for anybody to subscribe. It's kind of our outside the paywall, get a taste of the sports business journal sort of thing. So, people can always check that out, even if they don't have a subscription, to Sports Business Journal.
I'll make sure to have a link to that for anybody in the show notes if they want to check that out, because that sounds like a lot of fun. And I think, yes, betting coming around, that was going to be a question that we're going to
Huge.
talk about in a little bit, considering. So I'm here in New Jersey, as I said
Mm-hmm.
before, and we've been just crushing it the last couple months. I think
Mm-hmm.
1.5 billion, if I'm not
Set another
mistaken.
record. Last two
Yep.
months, I think they've set
hmm
records.
Yep, set records the last couple months. Hopefully, one of these months we just get a bill, just a nice, cool 9 zeros in that betting handle. I'm putting a couple dollars into that pool. I promise, not that much, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
putting a couple dollars in. And I guess so with the digital side, one thing you said, people like that shorter, quicker, easier to read, easier to get through. But as a
Mm-hmm.
journalist at heart, like, isn't that frustrating? Like the Twitterification, I guess, of everything. And I personally hate Twitter. I think it's the worst place on planet Earth, and only bad things happen there. Now, that's obviously not true, but that's the way I feel every time I go on there. And I try and mute as many words as I possibly can because I don't want to see anything about any of those topics. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about college football, or the Mets. And I probably should mute a lot of the Mets stuff as well. I don't really wanna see it. So, I guess from your standpoint, from seeing kinda that happen over time, especially as you said, having some of those more veteran guys on the staff, you personally being there for about 15 years now,
Mm-hmm.
do you hate that? Just kinda seeing how everything has to get shrunk to if it's not in 280 characters, people aren't gonna care nearly as much about it?
That doesn't bother me as much. I'm on Twitter. I'm actively putting stuff out there a lot.
Where can everybody
That's
find you on Twitter, Austin?
at Austin Karp. Very simple.
There we
One
go.
word
Nice
there.
and easy.
But that has become the place where you break news. That's kind of like the old stock ticker. It's always coming down, and you're looking for the latest information. And yeah, it can get a little bad there, depending on what topics.
Mhm.
Politics, especially now, is very hard. It's you don't want to read that stuff. So in that case, yeah, maybe you want stuff that's in your inbox that you can really filter. And
Mhm.
we want to be cognizant of people's time. And there's a lot of time at work. There's a lot of time with other newsletters that they're interacting. Maybe it is politics. Maybe it's something from Entertainment Weekly. Maybe they're into movies. So we want to give them a taste of what's going on and as much information as possible, but be respectful of their time. And that's why I'm not upset with the brevity of it. You're still getting pretty good information, very breaking news, analysis. We're providing a great value for the people that subscribe to those newsletters.
Mhm. Yeah, make sure everybody go follow at Austin Karp. It sounds like you do have some pretty good stuff that you're putting out there, especially about those ratings and
A
everything
lot of
that's going on.
ratings.
A lot of rating stuff. Very curious, I guess. That was kind of your calling card, and I guess that's actually been a hot topic in the streets recently,
Mhm,
as we've seen kind of with all the sports not being here, and then all the sports coming back, and some people saying it's politics that they're not, not as many people are going to watch, and obviously NBA Finals is a good one. We had Game 6 of the NBA Finals, LeBron James winning his fourth. I watched that one,
mhm.
but I also had the back button going, flipping over to a random Sunday night game. The Cardinal, or who was it? The Vikings and the
A lot of
Seahawks.
competition. Yeah,
Yeah,
twice they went up against Sunday Night Football.
and, like, that's awful for the NBA. They don't
Oh,
wanna
yeah.
do that, and that's why they have their sport that ends in, June, July timeframe,
Mhm.
when they don't have to worry about that stuff. I guess, is there any, I guess, from your point of view, it sounds like you're more just kind of reporting, but is there any, I guess, how do you feel about it? Do you think it is just football is king and forever and always will be king, and it doesn't even matter if LeBron's trying to go for his 4th or 5th or
Mhm.
10th? Or is it just timing? Is it the politics of it? What have you seen, kind of just doing your own research personally?
It's the timing. That is the biggest factor right now. You have just too much sports going on right now, especially like I said, from that late August through the end of the NBA Finals. There was just so much going on that was part of the calendar. That should have been part of the calendar in the spring.
Mhm,
And yeah, the NFL is king, and it's always going to overshadow you. And that's why you saw in recent years, even sports that tried to end early in the fall, whether it be the PGA Tour or the IndyCar Series, they're like, we don't even want a piece of that. We're moving our calendar to end on Labor Day weekend or right before Labor Day because no one wants to go up against football. Will that always be the case? I'm not going to say that. I mean, I can't speak for 25, 30, 50 years out because if you look that long in the
mhm,
past, baseball was king.
yep,
And so you never want to say never. And the demographics are a little older for football. They're a little better for basketball. But am I worried about like the NBA and the sharp drop that they saw for the playoffs and the final? No, you can't make any sort of judgment this year compared to last year. Anybody who is making that sort of comparison, like, oh, the NBA is in trouble because they're down in October versus what was normally a June. No, like you're not really understanding the sports media landscape and
mhm,
how it all really works. Um, Now, every property was seeing most properties were seeing that sort of decline, whether it was the
mhm.
NHL or the U.S. Open of golf, U.S. Open of
Ooh,
tennis, like everything that had shifted or was seeing increased competition was down, and football is also down. But like Roger Goodell said, we'll take down 10% right now, just given the nature of everything. And it's not just the competition; it is an exhaustion level that you're kind of seeing out there, and not just watching, it's watching, yeah, an exhaustion level from watching sports, but also an exhaustion just on being in COVID for so
mhm,
long. People are just kind of tired, and you're watching sports, and there's no crowd at
mhm,
many or most of these, or if it is, it's a reduced crowd. And seeing the crowd on TV, that's a big part of a telecast. Like the crowd goes wild, like that, like a loud, 3-2 count in the World Series and the home crowd is just going nuts. Like you're not feeling
mhm.
a lot of that. Or, if it's a last second shot in the NBA, the crowd's not on their feet going nuts for there's something to be said for that is that it's just not the same. So like it's tough to you can make the year over year comparisons just to see
Yeah.
what it is, but to judge the health of a sport or the health of a league right now based on that, I think that is almost disingenuous.
Mm,
Now, for the NBA in particular, like a lot has been made about, oh, there's they did a lot with Black Lives Matter, but so did sports like NASCAR. I think the people that are making the big deal about that, I don't know that was necessarily the NBA's target audience, or they weren't watching the NBA beforehand,
mhm.
anyways. So I don't really see much of in the data that I've seen. I haven't seen much attributed to that in terms of loss of audience.
Love it. Shout out Clay Travis. I hate that guy. But anyway, so for, we were talking about the NBA, obviously, as you said, the NFL is down too, but that's also
Mhm.
because there's other sports on, right? I'm sure the
Yeah.
NBA or the NFL would have had better ratings that night that LeBron James was going up for his, I'm sure they're kind of happy that a lot of
Yeah,
this stuff
LeBron
too.
James in LA.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like
That's what the NBA loves. They love getting the Lakers.
and one thing about the, the NBA in particular, as you said, is that the demographic skews a lot younger. So you always hear Mark Cuban come on. He also doesn't like Clay Travis, so maybe me and Mark should have a show. But he always comes on and talks about, hey, well, like we have X number of with 15, once these games are over, we then have people that go onto YouTube and watch the highlights of these games.
Mhm.
And, overnight there's another 15 million views on these just these highlight games and these reactions. And how do you as a journalist, working especially that ratings aspect of it. Obviously, the live aspect is necessary because that's what advertisers are paying for, right?
Yeah.
It's the last frontier of TV. If it wasn't for sports, I would not have cable and I would save myself a lot of money. But because live sports, you have to watch them live. I hate streaming them because even if I'm on that half-second delay, it doesn't feel as real.
Yeah, and you can't do that two-screen experience because you might get something on Twitter. You're like, wait, I haven't seen the last shot.
Exactly, but I do that two-screen experience. Sometimes we do a four-screen experience when necessary, on Sundays particularly. But how do you look at that aspect of like, okay, maybe the NBA ratings are X when it's live, but then understanding the digital space of it and how much streaming is coming into play, how much YouTube and these reaction and these highlight videos are coming into play. Now, I know you can't really utilize those numbers, but how do you kind of take that to, I guess, change the conversation or at least give light to it to make sure people understand like, hey, there's this generation of kids that never have had TV and they love the NBA more than anybody. You just won't see it in those particular ratings.
I'm going to take the streaming part of that first, the
Okay.
streaming of a live event. Yeah, that is growing. And that, while ratings are down, streaming of these events is up big. The problem is it's still a kind of a drop in the bucket
Yeah.
compared to where it's being shown on linear TV, which is, ESPN, ABC, Fox, etc. And that's where the majority of eyeballs continue to be. But I mean, I think everyone knows the future is streaming. How long it takes for a complete migration. I mean, look how long it took for things to get on cable, like the college football playoff or Monday Night Football. Like that was decades. And, we're just now seeing, strong enough bandwidth from some of these places to be able to support something like that. So when you see about like, oh, Amazon's interested in a package of NFL games, that's great. And they have the money, but the NFL would lose millions and millions of eyeballs. And the advertisers aren't going to want to pony up for that sort of thing. So while they're going to want to work with Amazon, they want that sort of partner to work with. I don't know that they're necessarily going to give them one of those bigger Sunday packages, because not only are the incumbents wanting back in on that, you're just losing too many viewers to be able to put that sort of package there. Now, one thing you can maybe look at is maybe Amazon takes something like the NFL London games, because those are going 9 o'clock on Fox or CBS anyways, and who knows if Fox really wanted those to begin with. You're getting a couple million viewers, but it's something that the NFL might want to test a package out with a streaming company like Amazon. In regards to like social media, I mean, it's so important. The NBA is on their game with connecting through so many platforms. It was Twitter and it's Facebook and it's Instagram and it's TikTok and it's Snapchat, and all these places have dedicated sports departments now because they know the avidity that a sports fan brings, and it'll get them on that platform. And the leagues know that by being on the platforms, they're connecting to a much younger audience. And there's something else I want to talk about, like, with respect to the NBA versus something like the NFL. The NFL is the king in the United States, and they have a huge deal and huge media rights deals. And the NBA has a very good media rights deal, but not at that level. But the NBA is also picking up in international deals. They have deals all over the world in places like, Brazil and Japan and the Baltics and the Balkans, and, anywhere that NBA players are coming from, because it's a much more global, player base. And those rights fees are going to continue to grow. Now, don't get me wrong, NFL games are shown internationally, but, you're not getting players from Slovenia or Serbia or Australia or Brazil and Argentina that are, coming into the NFL right now.
Yeah, and that's a really good point as well, because I mean, there's so many. I mean, we heard about it in the beginning of the NBA season, which feels like it was like 3 years ago now, with everything that happened with China and how they're going to lose their ass because the Rockets are not pretty much not allowed to be played. Obviously, the Rockets being one of the biggest teams in China because of
The
Yao
biggest
Ming.
team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because of Yao Ming when he went, and he was on that team for I don't even know how long. It felt like his whole career, and that aspect of it made China huge. Many of the
Huge
people in China
revenue loss. Yeah.
huge, and it's just crazy when you think about it, like, they have better ratings in China, some NBA games do, than they actually do here in the United States because of that aspect, which is, very
Sheer
important.
numbers. It's a sheer numbers game. You got a
Yeah,
billion and a half people.
that
You
helps.
know.
That definitely helps. That definitely helps. So I think that part is pretty interesting as well. And I guess so with managing editor, right, of digital platforms, I
Mhm.
guess what does that encompass all things internet? Is that all social media, podcast, email, newsletter? Like that sounds like a lot of stuff considering that's the
It is.
lifeblood of sports now, right? As we've been talking about, everything if it's not online, did it really even happen? So like how do you have 35 minutes, 40 minutes from me in the middle of a Wednesday? I do appreciate it again. Everybody make sure to go follow at
Well,
Austin
budgeting
Karp.
of
But
time. 24 hours in a day. So everyone just needs to remember that there are 24 hours. You can get a lot
mhm,
done, but and you also have to balance that with home life and
and I
things like
appreciate
that.
it.
But yeah, when I came over, we weren't really podcasting a whole lot. Our social media needed a lot of work, and I've now hired a staff, and I've kind of hired some people that know what they're doing,
Mhm.
and I've kind of stepped away, and I contribute editorially where I can help. But I mean, they're so smart that I just kind of watch and marvel at what they've been able to do, pumping out content, getting connected on different platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or we have Facebook, and obviously Twitter is our primary vehicle. But you hire smart people and you let them do their work. You stay in touch. You communicate. I now I'm working a lot with the people who host our podcast, like Bill King, Andrew Levin are two of our primary hosts
Mhm.
there. We're always talking about, who do we want to get on? What topic is good? What's a new company that we could potentially target? Because we want to highlight the up and coming executives. We want to highlight up and coming companies that are trying to make their mark. So it's not just talking to the established people in the industry. You really want to get a mix of what's going on out there. But like you said, digital is a lot. We're pumping out a lot of podcasts, whether it's, we do a daily SBJ Unpacks podcast. And Abe Madcore, our executive editor, gives like a 4 to 5 minute news brief in the mornings called Buzzcast. And, those are all outside of outside the paywall. And I highly encourage you, if you are interested in the business of sports, to listen to both of those, particularly, Abe Madcore giving you the hits of the day, like what is
Mhm.
important, what you really need to be following, because he is one of, if not the leading sports business expert in the country. And we also do stuff around esports, and it's just trying to give people the option, like what you have all sorts of things that you can listen to in our suite of offerings.
And like 12, 15 years ago, did you ever think you'd be talking about kids playing video games?
I did not.
Mm.
I'd
Crazy, right?
say 5 years ago, once I started seeing some people really get into it, and we were really starting to focus on it, I'm like, all right, instead of fighting this, instead of
Mhm.
saying, oh, who cares about people watching people play video games, I leaned into it, and I really wanted to learn about it. I went down, I got in touch with a contact at Turner Sports, went down, watched a live E-League event where there was, it was a studio crowd, but they were going nuts over these 5 people playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And I'm like, this is nuts. And I talked to the producers about, they're treating it like, a live sports telecast. They brought people over from the NBA broadcasts they were
Mhm.
doing to film this. And, now you see a company like Riot Games, which makes the League of Legends title. You look at their championship that they do every year. They put on an event that is almost like the opening ceremony of the Olympics. Like it is that high level, high produced. They invest millions of dollars in it, and it is so well done. It is so impressive, and they are really adopting some of the best practices from stick and ball sports to produce these esports events.
And they're gigantic. League of Legends in particular. League of Legends, if a lot of people don't realize, they've actually had a professional league for a really long time. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
feels like, I mean, I think I'm getting my numbers mixed up, but it feels like it's been over 20 years that they've had like a professional league going on. And obviously
A
over the
lot.
last, it's been a lot. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. Hyperbole. Every good story needs a little hyperbole in it,
50,
right?
60, anything.
Yeah, like 100 years at this point.
But yeah, I mean, it's like UFC. When UFC started, it was very niche, and mixed martial arts was, it's not really a thing. And now it's on ESPN all the time. It was on
Hmm.
Fox for years, all the time. Like it's part of the mainstream culture, and that's what esports wants to do. And the reason that advertisers and investors are like, seeing dollar signs in their eyes is, like the NBA is a global sport. South America, Asia is huge. China, Korea, Europe, Australia. I mean, United States is, just kind of really catching up to, especially Asia in terms of avidity for these things.
Yeah, very fledgling, especially in the esports department. But we do have football, and I think that part
We
is
do have football. We love
we
us
have.
Sunday and Saturday football.
Yes, I watch a lot of football every weekend, and I love every second of it. So I love it. But Austin, man, this has been great. I actually have one question that I really like. What's been the biggest, most memorable scoop or exclusive that you've had in your career? Shout out, Ben.
Most memorable. I've broken the Super Bowl rating a couple times. That's nice.
Ooh.
You get a lot of play off of that.
Mhm.
I was able to break that. Recently, like Ally was going to be Charlotte FC's shirt
Mhm.
sponsor. Because it's not just the rating. You make a lot of contacts over the years, and you're able to break a lot of stories. I've broken a lot of rating stories that get a lot of play. Did a huge analysis around the impact 4 years ago of, like, here's what CNN, MSNBC, and CNN were doing, and how much it was really impacting sports ratings at the time.
Mhm.
Because that's when people started to realize, like, wow, like cable news is really taking a chunk away from overall sports viewing. But I try to do my work and move on to the next thing. You really don't have time to sit and take a victory lap,
Mhm.
because it is an everyday thing, and there's just a lot going on in the news business. The news business does not stop.
No.
People during the pandemic in particular were like, oh, wow, sports has stopped. I guess you're really not covering anything. I'm like, no, we're busier than ever, because it's, what does the impact of the
Mhm.
stoppage mean? Sponsorships, facilities, staffing, like there's just so much to cover, whether it's good or bad. And we saw this during the 2008 housing crisis as well. Like, what was the impact there? So it wasn't our first merry-go-round with this sort
Mhm.
of coverage.
Yeah. And so, one thing, don't watch cable news. It's poison, everybody. I tell my grandma that every day. It never works, but hopefully one of these days. What about so the Super Bowl ratings, you break those. Obviously, you have to have some great relationships with people.
Yeah,
I'm sure obviously over the 15 years. What are the other people doing? Like, if you get 115 million people to watch the Super Bowl and then the next year it's like 100, does those 15 million people, like, is it really that, is it fandom really? Because I feel like what the
just
heck are you doing in that
because
case?
it doesn't. I mean, the Super Bowl is pretty much non-dependent on the matchup these days. Maybe the Cowboys are in, you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
you'll get a bigger number, but
Yeah,
good luck
the
rooting for the
Cowboys are in. Come
Cowboys.
on, man. That's been like
Yeah,
25
exactly.
years. Get out of here.
But you got to remember that, like, half this country aren't really big sports fans. Like, they're doing other things. They're out working on their yard. People do lots of other things, and the population of the country is growing. The demographic makeup of the country is changing, and yeah, I mean, fewer people might be watching sports overall, but their leagues and networks are getting creative in how they're offering, where they're offering products. Maybe you don't want to watch a 3 or 4 hour game. You just want to watch, the last half or the last quarter. And that's something the NBA has been offering. You can pay
Mhm.
just to watch that. Or, like you said, well, that's why social media is so important, because some people just want to see the highlights. But in terms of, if you're advertisers, brands still need to sell product,
Mhm.
and they need to advertise that product. And still the best way to do that is with live sports.
Mhm.
It used to be, you had Cheers and you had Frasier and you had Friends and you had Big Bang Theory, where you could show commercials during that because it was still destination television. But if you're in terms of entertainment programming like that, I mean, that's going to be non-existent. That's going to be on stream. Those are the first things that will go completely to streaming services.
Mhm.
The big things now are news and sports. So if you look at the most viewed telecasts in any given year going forward, it's just dominated by the NFL and your NBA Finals or World Series. Or if the Olympics are on, you'll get 17 to 20 nights maybe crack the top 100, or all of them. It just depends. But with Big Bang Theory gone, like, you're not really seeing anything that is scripted really crack that list. It's
Mhm.
the Emmys and the Oscars and the things like that. You got to be live.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, Big Bang Theory, putting that in a group with Seinfeld and Frasier and Cheers. I don't know. Not the biggest fan. But one other question here by Marcel. Appreciate the
Mhm.
question. Has the pandemic improved journalism in certain ways? Or I guess let's make it more general. How has the pandemic affected journalism, both positive and negative?
Well, at first it was interesting because there was no live sports to cover. So people that normally were writing game stories, they all of a sudden wanted to become sports business experts.
Hey.
So everyone was kind of worried about what was going on, and now that we're back, everyone's kind of interested. People are getting more into their team and league beats, and it's affected it in that more people are working remotely. You're not necessarily following a team for a whole season. You're not in training camp, and companies are seeing that you can do that remotely. I guess maybe you don't get the same feel, I guess, in sport. You got to be there for sports. You got to be on the field talking to athletes, and people are adjusting. And but there's been a lot more interest in the business of sports for sure, whether it be from an ESPN or The Athletic or anything like that. But we've been doing this for a long time. We continue to be at it. We're offering more stuff, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done and that we've increased it, and the staff that we've added during this time. We're just kicking ass and taking names.
I love it. Kicking ass, taking names. Sports Business Journal, Sports Business Daily. They've been around for a little while. Legacies at this point. Obviously, you've been around for a little while as well, Austin. And sincerely do appreciate you taking some time out of your day. Explain a little bit about what you've done, what you're doing. And I guess just the last thing, where are you going? What's next? I mean, managing editor of digital at a giant media company, or a relatively sized media company, especially within the space. That's pretty sweet, considering digital is one of the most important things now when it comes to what we're talking about with news. But I guess, where do you go from here, man?
I'm really interested in the data and analytics that we're starting to offer. I did my undergrad at Georgia Tech, so I have a lot of that just in my background as well. And we have a new product called Sports Atlas, where we're going to be offering some really unique, fresh information related to sports and sports business. And I'm interested in working that into our editorial products. Like, here's what happened, here's the business of it. Here's what the numbers mean, because we can provide that expertise.
And then the last thing that I forgot that I was going to ask, betting. How excited are you to start covering betting? I mean, we've seen the Darren Rovell effect over at places like the Action Network. They do some cool stuff. I mean, it doesn't sound like you're going to be, you're probably going to be more on the business side of betting, seeing, what DraftKings has done, how it's done it, those types of things. Obviously, new books popping up every other day. It feels like, what, I guess, as you said, the sports betting is starting this week, correct?
On Friday, we'll be launching, SBJ betting, where we're covering the business of sports betting, like you talked about. Like, who are the players? What are they doing? What does the legislation look like, almost state by state? Because it's not a federal issue. It's tough to cover state by state. And, it's a fledgling industry. We are just getting started. And, where are brick and mortar betting? How is that doing? Like, who is doing mobile betting? It's like you said, New Jersey is a mobile betting state. I've heard stories about people, you take the train in from the city, you get off on that first platform in New Jersey, everyone's all of a sudden getting on their phone to try to place bets. And, how can we get to mobile betting a little quicker? And also, you see places like the American Gaming Association talking about, like, how do we, if we're going to be doing this, if we're really going to make a run at sports betting in this country, let's do it in a positive way. Let's do it in a mindful way. Let's not get minors. Let's not do advertising. Let's not, like when DraftKings and FanDuel were blanketing,
God, that was awesome.
telecast a couple of years ago. Like we can't do that. Like, we gotta be mindful that underage people are watching these things, and treat them almost like alcohol or tobacco ads. Like, be very respectful so that we're not getting, youth addictions to sports betting in this country. It's very important.
Yeah, but it's also awesome. I think that's
it is awesome if it's done, in a respectful manner, and
exactly
like anything.
Does North Carolina doesn't have sports betting yet, right?
I think there may have been approval for one that hasn't opened yet on one of the Indian tribes has a casino here, but definitely not mobile for sure.
Yeah, mobile is awesome. It's a lot of fun. So once everyone can do it, say it again.
So they tell me.
Yes. Hopefully when it does become legal and live there, you'll be good to go. And obviously, we're seeing a lot of states start to open up the mobile aspect, because they're seeing places like New Jersey and Colorado and the revenue that's coming in. And obviously, over the last few months with the pandemic, many states have lost a lot of revenue and paid out a lot more money. So it's just one of those things where it's perfect storm. I mean, not the best kind of storm. Obviously, we're not happy that all this happened, but it's for the industry. It is type of a perfect
you also
storm.
If you're a state, you don't want to fall behind to a neighbor. If you're, Tennessee, especially, in Memphis, politicians saw that Mississippi was really stepping up their game, and people were going into Mississippi to go play sports bets. So they're like, all right, we gotta get at this on the legislative level. And, that's not a fast task sometimes. Government just doesn't move that quickly. And so they knew they had to get on their game.
Yeah, and the fact that all these states are kind of doing it on their own. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, the ones that have come later can see places like, well, do you want to do it like Delaware and run it through the lottery and make $10, or do you want to do it like New Jersey, open it up and you can make
Yeah.
hundreds of millions of dollars? So it's just one of those things. So I'm very excited to get to see some of the stuff that you guys are rocking with. Excited for Friday. As of this is a recording on October 21st. It is a Wednesday, so a
Mhm.
couple more days, man. So I'm excited to see it
Get
for
me
you.
off.
But can't wait, man. But Austin Karp, this has been fantastic. One more time, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
At Austin Karp.
Nice and easy. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening, everybody. Hope you make it a wonderful day and appreciate your time today, Austin. Thank you.
Michael, thanks for having me.